On some interesting breaking news internationally, apparently the government of Zimbabwe is going to be compensating white farmers who have lost their farms during the presidency and the government of the former president Robert Mugabe. So they are going to be paid more than 3 billion USDs. It's going to be compensated back to those farmers. Of course, not each of them is going to get that money. It's going to be quantified. I don't know what the process is. For more information, I have a clip here, one of the interviews from Newsroom Africa. If you're interested to know what's going to be happening, if black people who lost their farms too are going to be compensated or not, I have a clip here. You're going to watch, you're going to listen for better understanding. People of Zimbabwe, this is very interesting for you. I know there's people here who watch my content who are from Zimbabwe, and I think you would need to watch this.
The Zimbabwean government will start paying compensation to farmers who lost land under a late former president Robert Mugabe. The farmers will reportedly get a total of $3.5 billion US, which will be paid in installments. The first $20 million is supposed to be disbursed before the end of October. According to the government, this is part of a broader effort to revive the country's agricultural sector. I'm now joined by Eddie Cross, economist and a former member of the National Assembly of Zimbabwe. Eddie, very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. Would you say that what happened here, the farms situation, was solely responsible for the collapse of the country's agricultural sector?
Oh, very much so. There's no doubt about that. I think the government of the day at that time expected that simply changing the ownership of the farms would not interfere with agricultural production, but in fact it led to a complete collapse of not just commercial agriculture, but also agriculture throughout the economy. The small-scale sector in the informal economy the output fell by as much as the formal sector when this program was implemented back in 2000.
What did the people who got to get the farms actually do, or should I say, not do?
Well, there were, at the end of the process, we were left with about 300 white farmers still on their properties. Why they were selected for special treatment, I have no idea. But I suspect it was collaboration with the authorities in their areas. And then there were about of the 4,800 white farmers who were dispossessed at that time, the great majority were farming in the north of the country, and the farms that they were taken over, around about 8 million hectares, were divided into about 180,000 properties. And these were classified into two categories, A1 and A2 settlers. A2 settlers were limited to about 500 hectares and A1 settlers to about 10. And as a consequence of that, we saw very large areas of the agricultural sector were in fact abandoned, mainly because the new occupants of these properties simply had no idea what to do.
But did those who kept their farm, whether they were collaborators or whatever, do better than those who took over the farms from the white settlers who were?
Oh, yes. By and large, the farmers who remained farming were able to maintain output on their farms. And that included the agribusiness sector. The agribusiness sector was not substantially affected by this program. The program was largely politically driven because the white farmers had supported the opposition back in 2000. And they wanted to, a bit like the Russian kulaks under Stalin in 1933 in the Soviet Union, where they were independent farmers who were wiped out by the then regime. Mugabe had exactly the same objective. The agribusiness sector, very large commercial industrial farms, Triangle, Hippo, Northern Estates. These farms were largely left alone and were able to continue farming without interruption. The only thing they lost was their title rights. They were not able to use their land as collateral for bank borrowing.
I mean, if one looks at the country's external debt, which amounts to $12 billion, one wonders whether the compensation that people are going to receive is in fact affordable. Can the country afford what is being promised here?
Well, our national debt, in fact, is 21 billion. It's not 12 billion. It's 21 billion. Of that, about 12 is owed to foreign creditors, and 9 is owed to domestic creditors. It's not a great deal of money. In fact, it's probably about 40% of our GDP. So we are relatively underborrowed as a country. The national debt is not really the problem. The problem is that we're in arrears, we've not been servicing it, we're subject to penalty interest rates and all sorts of other things related to that. And the 3.5 billion, which was negotiated by the government of the day back in 2019, under the new government led by the President Mnangagwa, that compensation, in fact, only represents about a third of the real value of the assets acquired. And it only represents the value of the improvements on the land. Now, the 3.5 will be paid over 10 years, and I think that on that basis, it's relatively affordable. Obviously, it's inflated our national debt, but in fact, it's an essential part of restoring legality and the recognition of property rights in Zimbabwe. The government is following that up now with issuing 99-year leases on remaining commercial farms, and this is going to help boost production very much.
You just watched, right? Yeah, speaking about a lot of things, but I want to speak about why the economy of Zimbabwe fell during the presidency of President Mugabe. It's because he was sanctioned. He was sanctioned by the European nations, the European unions. It was sanctioned by the USA. They were no more doing business with Zimbabwe. You know why? Because of the violation President Robert Mugabe did. He was violating the human rights. Apparently, there was no freedom of speech in Zimbabwe. People were complaining, but their complaints were not heard. Even the land redistribution process, it was done by force. The Zimbabwean government and the PF soldiers, they took the land by force from the white farmers. They took the land by force from people who were occupying the land. It was done violently. So the international unions, they sanctioned, they didn't do business with Zimbabwe. They chose to distance themselves from doing business with Zimbabwe. They were no more sending their exports to Zimbabwe. Is it export, import? They were no more importing products to the Zimbabwean market. So the economy had to fall. The rand, the dollar of Zimbabwe had to crash because of violation of human rights. There is more to it. If you want to know more about this and why the economy of Zimbabwe fell, you can do your own research. There's plenty of information you're going to find out there. But the breaking news is that these people are going to be compensated for the lands they lost during the presidency of the former president, Robert Mugabe. It is what it is. That's what's happening in Zimbabwe. Thank you very much.